Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the program. They're desperate to get Trump out of office. I thought it was kind of fantastic, phantasmagorical, wonderful, awesome. It was kind of peachy to see her make that admission. So I want to run through a couple things. First of all, on the show today, we're going to have Marc He's an RNC spokesperson, and he joins the program to talk to us about the State of the Union kerfluffle and what we're going to do about that, what the president is going to do, what can be the response now that Nancy Pelosi has actually let us know where she stands. I'm going to put these slides up one more time. These are obviously, they're on during the show. You can find them at politico.com. These slides are fantastic. You can take images of them, screen caps of them, use your phone, use your laptop to do that, and share them on online social media. Here they are. We've gone through them, and we probably will again, but here they are again. I just want to make sure that people see them at the top of the show. These slides are straight from the Department of Homeland Security, and they share all of the information that the Democrats have been avoiding in the briefings. It's kind of fascinating to see just these. It's like 5 or 6 slides, okay? So it's not a lot of, it's not lengthy. It's not something that would have ran against their schedules. They refuse to participate because the information doesn't support their position, which is open borders. And it's interesting to see a lot of Democrats coming forward and saying, well, we're not actually all opposed to physical barriers, and we actually do want to see the government opened up. And, so what news isn't telling you is that the Republicans tried to fund the employees, the 800,000 employees who are currently going without paychecks. They tried to fund them, and that bill did not pass the House because only 6 Democrats voted for it. So these are just a couple of quick, you want to clean things up so we're all dealing on the same page. That's the truth of the matter. The Republicans want people to be paid, but they want the border to be secured. So we're going to have a fantastic time talking to Marc this hour. We're going to talk about the Democrats through one of their spokespersons. One of the chief spokespersons of Democrats in America is Joy Behar. She expresses the hardcore leftist aspect perfectly. She runs straight from their playbook and they from hers. They're on the same team. And often she says things on the show that garner lots of applause. And this line that she shared was no different. But I was surprised by the candor. And even Whoopi Goldberg, who normally, she rolls her eyes at Joy Behar a lot on the program, but she normally is pretty much lockstep with Joy Behar. Joy Behar made the statement, and Whoopi Goldberg kind of had to sit back for a second, like, wait, I thought we were talking about these boys. And in other words, Trump derangement syndrome coming up next segment, not this segment. We're trying to make a mea culpa. So we'll get into that a little bit, and we'll talk about how now Nancy Pelosi owns the shutdown. And so the poll numbers might not reflect that because so many Americans watch CNN and MSNBC and mainstream news outlets for their news. But the fact is, it's owned by the person who refuses to negotiate. It's owned by the person who is intractable in their position and will not move. The president has made an offer. He's actually made 2 offers. And either one of those could be responded to in such a way that would make it possible for a deal to be struck. A deal where everybody feels some pain, no one's completely satisfied, but the border is sealed and the government is reopened. And dreamers are still with us since they're still here anyway. It's not like they're being deported in huge numbers. Some of them are being deported because they're actually committing crimes and violating the spirit of the order under which they're still here. And the rest of them are still receiving government benefits. They're still sucking our welfare system dry. They're still attending our colleges and universities as in-state students, while actual Americans who could definitely benefit from the reduced tuition are paying out-of-state tuition. They're operating above the level of any regular American citizen. And if that doesn't tick you off, hold on, I got more for you. So I want to get into our daily confession today. It's Ezekiel 16:20, and you took your sons and your daughters, whom you had borne to me, and these you sacrificed to them to be devoured. Were your whorings so small a matter that you slaughtered my children and delivered them up as an offering by fire to them? Now, you're probably thinking, whoa, that kind of turned a little bit. Where are you reading from? Well, that's Ezekiel 16:20 through 21, and it has to do with child sacrifice. In those days, there was child sacrifice going on, and people thought that by sacrificing children, they could, the same thing we think about prayer that we know to be true, they thought about idol worship and child sacrifice. And it was a ritualistic endeavor, and it was something that was practiced as a religion. And so you might be thinking, okay, what's that got to do with like right now? Well, you may have seen in the news that New York State passed a bill through their legislature, through their state legislature, making it possible for any woman who is pregnant in the state of New York to have an abortion up and through the 9th month of pregnancy. So you can be full term with a baby that is not only viable outside of the womb, but that you could be about to deliver, and they will still abort it for you in the state of New York. No restrictions. And so I got to thinking about that. You know, why would they do that? Well, a few things have caused Democrats to kind of go back to they're at the altar and they're pouring out everything they've got onto the baby sacrifice God. It's because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, while she's still perfectly fine, she's doing, you know, she's actually ruling on cases and adding her opinions from home, working from home. The handwriting is on the wall. She can't live forever, and when she does go on into the afterlife, there will be a conservative judge appointed in her place, and no amount of shenanigans by the Democrats will prevent that from happening. Now, they've already discussed how when they're next in the presidential role, they'll pack the court and we'll have 28 Supreme Court justices instead of 9, and there'll be so many of them that the conservatives will only have 6 or 7, and all the rest will be liberals. And there really isn't anything in the Constitution that prevents them from doing that. But until then, they have to be able to ensure that, they can have abortion on demand, and that if the Supreme Court rules against it and it's remanded back to the states, because they know it just as well as we do, it goes back to the states, then individual states will be able to engage in whatever mayhem they want. And they've just given us a preview of what that looks like. Abortion up until the 9th month. But I want you to hear the reaction to passing this bill, because remember, abortion was supposed to be safe, legal, and rare. Abortion is supposed to be safe, legal, and rare. That's what the Democrats have told us since 1973 when they passed Roe v. Wade. They've said all along the only reason to make abortion legal in this country is to stop back alley coat hanger abortions. And so it has to be lawful, it has to be legal, it has to be constitutional, it has to be something that any woman can get anywhere, but safe, legal, and rare. Well, they've gone completely to the other side of the universe on that one. And now this is what it sounds like when they passed this bill through the legislature. Of course, all the Republicans voted against it. This is the sound of them celebrating the fact that it is now lawful for any person to do an abortion on any other person, regardless of whether or not the person doing the abortion is a doctor, and that you can have an abortion. You can just change your mind. Your due date is Monday of next week. You can change your mind on Sunday, and your next door neighbor can give you an abortion, and there's nothing anybody can do about it because it's lawful in the state of New York. As long as you're in the state of New York, that whole shenanigans, it doesn't have to be safe. It doesn't have to be rare. It could be up until the 9th month. Just do what you want. Here they are celebrating the passage of that law. It's number 5. So they're standing around in the New York legislature, and the cameras are panning around the space, and they have a beautiful building. That's one of the things it's really interesting. As an aside, I know it's a serious topic, but as an aside, if you ever want to take kind of an off the beaten path tour, you can tour the different capitals of the different states of all of these, 50 United States. Most of them were designed by one or two, I think there's like 3 primary architects, and they're all done in a certain architectural style, and they're all located in the part of the state that it all has meaning. It's all very meaningful. And so if you visit your state capital and you notice the beauty of the building and how they all have these domed roofs and all of that, they have these all over the country. Every state has one, and they're all unique in their architectural style and beauty. That being said, they're in a beautiful space. They're in a lovely venue. They're in the halls of their legislature. This is the place where they make law and they enshrine the intent of the people of the state of New York into actual law. They codify what they feel right and wrong is into law in that hall. And they just are celebrating and whooping and hollering and clapping, because to them, it's less about abortion and whether or not women are dying or being rushed to the hospital or are made barren after an abortion, losing the ability to ever have a child again. No. It's about sticking their fingers up in the face of who they see to be some kind of oppressor, which is people on the right who are just saying this is not a constitutional right. There's no way we eliminate in our society people going out and having a doctor who will do it for them, paying that doctor or coercing that doctor into giving them an abortion. There's no way it ever stops completely. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Abortion rates are down in this country. You know, we had less than 1 million for the last reportable year per government statistics, the CDC and the Guttmacher Institute, all of the orgs that actually track that stuff. But that's not actually true. Yeah, we have less abortion in this country. The pro-life movement has made huge strides, and really technology is our friend in the pro-life movement, because technology shows young children, this is your incoming brother or sister. It shows teenagers, look, this is my new niece, this is my new nephew who's going to be born in this month. This is my younger sibling. It's really difficult to say that it's a younger sibling when it's a picture of an ultrasound on the kitchen door or your refrigerator, but it's a clump of cells that needs to be flushed away if it's not put up there. It's difficult to sell that. Most people are becoming acutely aware of how real human life is from the very moment it begins to grow. But you might be wondering, why is this such a huge concern for us if our abortion rates are going down? Even if New York State does what they do, it's just one state. Well, New York is certainly just one state, but they also are home to two specific, like they're little boroughs where more babies are aborted than are born alive. Internationally, you might be thinking, well, it's kind of rough, but okay. What is the number one cause of death on this planet? Is it genocide? Is it heart disease? Is it diabetes? Is it starvation? Because we do have nations across this, where people don't even eat every day. Actually, the number one leading cause of death globally in 2018 was abortion. Statistics compiled by Worldometers tells us that 8.2 million people died of cancer, 5 million died of smoking, 1.7 million died of AIDS, HIV, 41.9 million unborn babies were killed across the planet. So the number one cause of death is abortion at 41.9 million, and then 1.7 million from AIDS, 5 million from smoking, and 8.2 million from cancer. So cancer is a huge cause of death worldwide, but it pales in comparison to abortion. And who is probably the number one exporter of abortion when it comes to paying for abortions abroad? America. So if you think we're escaping the judgment of that, if there's some way around it, that God is ignoring that the blood of all of those innocents doesn't cry out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether we're in church on prayer Wednesday and we're praying, or whether we have our hands lifted up and we're jumping and excited to the latest contemporary Christian music song on church on Sunday, whatever we're doing, whether we're working or praying or in Bible study or taking care of our kids or cooking dinner or scrubbing toilets or mopping floors, whether we're driving to and from work, whether we're beseeching God on behalf of the unborn, whatever we're doing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, unborn babies are being snuffed out across the globe, and we're helping to pay for it as American taxpayers. And now New York City says you can do it up until the day they're born. God have mercy on us. We'll be back after this.
"80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Have you ever been really thirsty? Your mouth is dry and all you want is a big, tall glass of cool, refreshing water. I've been there. Every time I work out, I perspire, and boy, I get thirsty. When I'm really thirsty, I don't want soft drinks or juice. I crave good old H2O. Usually after I quench my thirst, I let out a big sigh of satisfaction. But it's only temporary. No matter how good the water tasted, no matter how refreshed I feel, I know it's just temporary. I'm going to thirst again. In John chapter 4, we find the story of Jesus meeting a Samaritan woman by a well. She'd been in and out of all kinds of relationships, and whether she knew it or not, she was spiritually thirsty. Jesus intercepted her and used the well as an object lesson. Listen to what he says in verses 9 and 10. The Samaritan woman therefore said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." In other words, Jesus is gently saying, "Lady, you don't know who you're talking to. I'll satisfy your thirst." But he says, you have to choose the living water. What about you? Are you thirsty? Is there dry thirst deep within your heart, a longing to be satisfied? Here's what I want you to remember and do today. Your search has ended. There is a permanent thirst quencher. His name is Jesus. He is the living water. Give your life to him, and you will never thirst again.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to American Family Radio. Welcome home. Thank you for being with us and for supporting everything that we do here. We are so appreciative of having your ears, and your eyes as you watch our programming on our online streaming. And I encourage you to like American Family Radio on the TuneIn app. So if you listen to us on the TuneIn app, please go over and hit the like button on American Family Radio. I noticed that even though we're a huge, huge force in the radio industry, they do not have us running on their leaderboard for popular channels to listen to, which means a lot of what we're sharing here, the message that could be getting shared with people who would stumble on it naturally because it would be on their leaderboard for the biggest podcasts, the biggest radio shows, of which we are, they don't have us up there. So I don't know if you have to pay for that or if it's an advertising mechanism, but I did notice that you can hit the like button on streams that you like. And if you're listening to us in the TuneIn app, please hit that button to show support for what we're doing. It's free, it's quick, it's easy. If you're a TuneIn app user, if you're using some other app, then, by all means, continue forward. What we really want is for you to listen and to be here with us. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Marc Lauder. He's coming on to join us, former press secretary for Mike Pence and RNC surrogate and spokesperson. Marc, thank you for coming on today.
No, thanks for having me, Stacey.
Okay, so let's talk about this. We got the State of the Union, which is turning into, for all intents and purposes, a gentleman's brawl where one side smacks the other with a fancy glove and the other side smacks the initiator with a glove. And then there's supposed to be a duel, and it looks like that's what's about to happen because the president now has to find another venue. I find it astounding that she would dare deny the president of the United States the opportunity to address Congress, that she's even able to do it, that her party would stand for it. It's such a lack of decorum, and it's so embarrassing for her, but she's doing it.
It just shows that for Nancy Pelosi and the radicals that are now governing the Democrat Socialist Party, it's politics over principle, over history. That they would deny the President of the United States the opportunity to speak to the people from the well of the House of Representatives. And let's not kid ourselves. We have a long history of presidents from one party, speakers from another. We have had a State of the Union in times of war, in times of trial, in times of even presidential unpopularity. there have still been State of the Union addresses by the president to the American people. It's one of those constitutionally required things, although the Constitution doesn't say how it needs to be done. So I tweeted this as soon as the original delay came out back in the January, a couple of weeks ago. I said that the president should take his message on the road and mail the speaker a copy of it, and he will have met his constitutional requirement. But the State of the Union is not about the hallowed halls and marble and gilded light fixtures in D.C. It's about the American people, and that's where our strength as a union actually comes from. So I think this is actually doing President Trump a huge favor, which could actually set forward a new precedent among American presidents of both parties of doing the State of the Union out there among the people. The D.C. is definitely not representative of the people. And so we'll see how this plays out. But I can guarantee you that the president will continue to give his State of the Union when he decides it's time to talk to the people about the state of our union.
So, Mark, I'm smiling so hard right now because we have great minds think alike. I tweeted out that I tweeted the president. I know he gets so many, you probably didn't see it, but my idea was similar to yours. I said, hey, we have a lot of really nice heated aircraft hangars in the state of Missouri, and you know how far we'll walk to meet you. We've set the record here. When he came to Columbia, people were walking. I was one of those people who walked 6 miles round trip because the parking was so far away from the venue because like 25,000 people showed up and not everybody could get in. And so we are like, come rain, come bad weather, muddy conditions, 6 mile hikes, whatever. If he wants to give the State of the Union in our great state, the state of Missouri, and I immediately had people calling into the show saying, no, we want him. We want him to come here. People were tweeting me, nope, Wisconsin is better. We have better spaces. He could literally do a 5-stop, whistle-stop tour where he flew around and gave the address 5 different times. And people would pack it to the rafters to hear it. He could mail Nancy Pelosi a copy. He could meet with some of the victims of illegal immigrant crime in each of those stops. I mean, I have so many wonderful ideas, which means I know the RNC and others that really actually have some input here probably have given him some fantastic, like, you could do this too. Don't forget you could do that. I look forward to seeing what he's going to do, but in no way can he let the American people down and not give the address, because Americans expect him to give a State of the Union address. And Nancy Pelosi does not represent the 64 million Americans who voted for him. And so we at least deserve to hear from him.
No, and despite the fact that Nancy Pelosi thinks that she and the president are co-equal in the eyes of the Constitution, they are not. And here's the thing. This is one of the reasons why I think President Trump was elected in the first place, because he actually said he was going to fight for the things that the American people believe in. We've had presidents of both parties, so this is nonpartisan, that have told us for decades that they would renegotiate NAFTA. They would challenge China. They would take care of the issue in North Korea. They would move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. They love to talk a big game, but when it actually came to doing something that was difficult, they usually shirked from that responsibility. And this is a president who believes in fighting, and he also believes in getting the job done. So I know I was in the White House a couple of weeks ago talking with the president. Still talk, obviously, on a regular basis with my former colleagues in the White House. This is a president who will not shirk away from a fight. And whether he does it in the hall of the Senate, which he can do with an invitation from Senator McConnell,
that's right,
or if he takes it on the road, he will deliver a State of the Union. I can almost guarantee, I'm very confident that he'll do it on his terms when and where he decides to do it.
What I find so interesting about this is that we've often seen, I mean, it's almost like clockworks with President Trump. He did this as a civilian when he was in the business world. He would take a seemingly negative result and he would turn it into an opportunity for, furthering his business or expanding his brand or what have you. And we've seen him do that quite a bit with his role as the president, where things that should have derailed him completely, he just soldiered through and was able to get through them. And some of them were quite difficult, like difficult moments in the presidency thus far this past 2 years. And I almost feel like Nancy Pelosi is giving him a gift by refusing to allow him to do the traditional venue. Because in the traditional venue, as she did last year, she had a lemon in the side of her mouth and she sucked her cheeks and she made faces and she refused to kind of stand up and honor the parts of the speech that were bipartisan. And in doing so, she really ginned up the Democrats' base. The people on Twitter were so excited by her, kind of shenanigans in her chair and the imagery. We're colorful. They're all wearing black, all that drama. Now she loses that platform. And if he gives the speech from somewhere else, she loses the ability to coordinate the response. She can give one, but it's not going to be as seamless as it would have been had she done the traditional State of the Union. Now the ball is in President Trump's court to create a spectacle of his own making on his own terms. I just can't see why she would agree to give him this. It's like a gift, a bouquet of flowers and a gift card.
Well, never underestimate the power of Democrats to overplay their hand. And I think even let's get this out of the straight partisanship. I think a lot of the American people, including folks who may be more middle of the road or maybe even slightly left of center, will look at this and see it for what it is, and it won't leave a good taste in their mouth. And then when you pile on the other things, the fact that, the president made a good faith offer to reopen the government last week and haven't even gotten a counterproposal. It was just no and nothing else. No, here's our offer. Here's what we would like. Will you talk to us and meet us? Just the answer is no. It's resistance. And I think a lot of people, I'm from Indiana, so I'm a Midwest person as well. Even folks who might be just slightly left of center or in the middle look at these kinds of things and they just go, that's not the way we want things to be. That's not how we want our government to operate. And if the Democrats want to be taken over by the radical socialists and governed by the people on the coast, that's one thing, but they're going to alienate the people in the middle. And I think stunts like this will do exactly that.
Mark, the point you're making really resonates because I often will hear, and it's so funny how I'm sure this happens to you too. You'll be somewhere and, maybe there's news on and you'll see people rolling their eyes, and usually it's CNN, but sometimes it's just local news, and it'll be on and people will be rolling their eyes and they'll say, I don't know why we send these people there, to Washington, D.C. They don't seem to be able to represent anyone. And then usually the first thing that happens is someone will just self-announce, well, I don't really like either of the parties. And then you'll see people nodding their heads. And then usually I have to out myself. I'll say, well, I'm definitely on the right, but I just don't understand why they can't work together, or they seem to have forgotten why we sent them there. So there is a sense among regular people who are shopping at grocery stores and pumping gas and waiting at the Jiffy Lube to get their oil changed that there's something really broken about the process and there's a lack of respect. I have my question for you, Mark, is what would have happened if who was the speaker when it was when the Republicans were in charge of the House and Barack Obama was president? Who was our speaker? Was it Paul Ryan?
In the beginning, it was John Boehner, and then it became Speaker Ryan.
Okay, so can you see John Boehner?
The both.
Yeah, John Boehner says to President Obama, you can't come. I know we invited you, but you can't come in here and give your address. What would have been the first thing that CNN, MSNBC, and every Democrat would have said about that situation?
Well, they would have, of course, that this would have been a break with constitutional norm. It would have been disrespectful to the presidency. Many would have obviously gone down and called them racist.
Yes.
And we know that. And there's a completely double standard, when Republicans, are the ones in power to the stunts. And this is what this is. This is a stunt. So we will see. I am positive that the president is going to rise above it. I hope that more people tune in to watch it, to see exactly what he says and take notice. If I was still in the White House, I would say there should be 280 whatever the number is, chairs for every Democrat lawmaker, senator, and House member.
Mm-hmm.
It should have their name on it. They should be invited. And let's see how many empty chairs are in that section and put it right up front so the American people can see that they don't even, not only do they want to not have the speech in the House, they don't want to hear what the President of the United States has to say, regardless of where it is held. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I have no doubt that President Trump's going to come out as the victor and looking better amongst regular people, not the Washington insiders, the people on the Acela corridor, the people who are actually out there and don't live, breathe politics every breath in every moment like those of us in the industry do.
You're right. I couldn't agree more. And I'll just add, if you have anyone that you can email and suggestions, we've had callers to the show say that what would really be impactful is to have a big, huge, 60-inch screen behind him and just have a slideshow presentation of every American that has lost their life to illegal alien crime when he does address the border issue. And the empty chairs, the slideshow of those Americans, because they span the spectrum socioeconomically, for ethnic background, location in the country, everything. These are just regular Americans randomly killed by illegal alien crime, and it's something that he's going to touch on. I think you're absolutely right. The empty chairs would be fantastic, and I can't wait to see what he does, Mark. I'm excited. Part of me is really depressed that this is where we are, but I know he'll turn this into something great that will be very memorable. And you said it could be precedent setting. Like, we could have other presidents decide to go out into the heartland and address the nation.
I think it could be. There's no requirement in the Constitution that says that it's done in Capitol Hill or in the House or even in Washington, D.C. It doesn't even say that they have to do it every year. The Constitution basically just says from time to time the president shall inform Congress on the state of the union. And so there is some ambiguity there, but nothing like something like this, which can set a new precedent that maybe next year he's going to say, I'm going to do that again, or let's do this somewhere else. Or, it could become the Super Bowl of politics where cities and venues are all bidding to see if they can get the president to do the State of the Union in their place, like a lot of cities bid and compete for a Super Bowl.
I like it. I like it, Mark. These ideas are fantastic. The president really should tune into our podcast occasionally when he has a few moments free, from Air Force One maybe. But this is all of these ideas, perfect. And I can't wait to see what he does. Marc Lotter, former press secretary for Mike Pence and RNC spokesperson, always welcome on the show. Thank you for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me, Stacey.
All right, talk to you again soon. I have to say that the more you think about it, you've had this situation, right? You have some news and you get it back and you're like, I don't like this news. And our graphics are awesome. Did you see what my producer was able to do with that little graphic there? If you're listening on terrestrial radio, you're probably thinking, I don't see anything. I'm just listening. I'm talking about on the live stream. He made some special graphic there, which was pretty cool. When you have something happen where initially you think to yourself, this is just the worst. I can't believe that I have to now deal with this situation. And so you kind of put it on the back burner for a while and let your feelings calm down. And then you come back to it. And as you start to look at the problem and figure out, well, what can I do? Now I have to deal with this. Then you start to see opportunities. You're like, well, I could do this or that. Or maybe sometimes I get so deep into the actual reaction to the word no or the whatever the scenario is, that I will be unable to come up with new, kind of fun ideas. And I'll kind of be almost complaining about it. And one of the kids or my husband or a friend will say, well, actually, this opens it up so that you can do X. And then I'll say, wait a minute, you're right. And that's when the juices start flowing. You're like, wait, she's right. I can do this, this, and this. And what if we did that? And before you know it, you're happy that you have this new development. So I encourage you, listeners, let's continue to pray for the president and his family and his administration and all of those who are working in Washington. Let's do it when we sit down to our meals. And when we get back, we'll be hearing from you. I'd love to talk to you today on the show, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037.
Can solid teamwork building principles apply to all of life? Here's Tony Dungy, author of The Soul of a Team, with today's uncommon moment.
In my book, The Soul of a Team, SOUL is an acronym, and the L stands for larger purpose, meaning contributing to the wider community in a lasting and significant way. After joining the Minnesota Vikings as defensive coordinator in 1992, I began meeting every Monday morning with Tom Lamphere, the team's chaplain. At his suggestion, we began studying the Old Testament book of Nehemiah. My studies with Tom were so significant that when a replica of my locker was displayed at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, it contained a Bible open to the book of Nehemiah just in front of my game ball from Super Bowl 41. It signifies the way God guides those who commit to following His own larger purpose.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of The Soul of a Team, from Tyndale House. More at CoachDungy.com.
Yo, what up, Sid?
Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro. Just left the club, you know, the usual.
The club? Man, them clubs don't love back, man. You ain't learned yet. You better slow down, dude.
Ah, come on, Sid. You remember those days? We used to turn up together, man.
Used to, brother. I'm on something much different.
Like what, though? I mean, that Jesus music you be rapping about, or beatboxing, or whatever you be doing.
I'm saying, though, that's how I worship. God gave me rap, so I give it back.
Why, though? Gospel rap is boring, man.
Boring? There's nothing boring about the ransom that ransomed me with himself. Took me off the shelf to transform me into my best. Surrounding me with those of like minds. He drops bombs, some of which is found on urbanfamilytalk.com.
Donald Trump's America.
For more than a century, Charlotte Pipe and Foundry in North Carolina led the industry. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, China, another company is accused by Charlotte Pipe of stealing their name and trademark. Here's Brad Muller of the original Charlotte Pipe Company.
We see that across a broad range of industries where they've stolen technology, they steal intellectual property, they counterfeit products. It's rampant.
It's not just theft. The Americans also accuse their state-subsidized Chinese competitor of dumping inferior products in world markets. The Commerce Department found Chinese pipe makers illegally undersold the U.S. market by up to 360%. While the Chinese contest the trademark case, the International Trade Commission ruled in the Americans' favor in the dumping case, allowing the U.S. to impose tariffs on Chinese pipes and fittings. And the U.S. campaign to level the playing field continues next week when trade talks head to Washington. William LaJeunesse, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We just instantly say that's what it is based on what we see in that moment, and then have to walk stuff back when it turns out we're wrong. Why is that? Do we keep making the same mistake?
Because we're desperate to get Trump out of office. That's why.
Not everybody, though.
But what does that have to do?
I think that's the reason. I think the press jumps the gun a lot because we have so much circumstantial evidence against this guy that we basically are hoping that, Cohen's got the goods and what have you. And so it's wishful thinking.
Right, but let's talk about the kids in this particular
all right.
confrontation, since that's the question.
Since that's the question. That's Whoopi Goldberg trying to steer the topic back to what they were originally discussing, which was they had to walk back their original comments about the Covington Catholic high school boys because it turns out they were not in the wrong. And I have to say, I don't often give kudos to Whoopi Goldberg, but I give kudos to her for during that clip and I didn't include that in what I asked to be cut for today. She tried to, in her way, to really admit that it wasn't just them. It wasn't just The View. It was a ton of different news and media outlets on the left and the right who just took a little bit of video and jumped into the fray and ginned up a mob. And she was trying to make the discussion about that when Joy Behar jumped in with her feverish, she's suffering from what I would call a very active and contagious case of Trump derangement syndrome. And that's where, every subject turns back to Donald Trump and how he's a criminal and he needs to be removed from office. And the only thing that cures that is viewing the president being removed from office, which would precipitate the immediate onslaught of secondary Trump derangement syndrome called President Mike Pence syndrome. Then he would need to be removed from office because the only true cure to the sickness is to be in possession of a Democrat who's the president of the United States. And let's be clear here. It's not that they want someone to be the president to make a great economy. They want someone to worship because they're not worshiping Almighty God. So they're worshiping Barack Obama. And it's evidenced by the fact that every time I say his name on the air, I get emails galore from people who can't spell and probably didn't graduate from high school. And the dumbest emails I've ever read. I mean, and I'm using the word dumb intentionally. It's not that the emails are unintelligent. It's that they are actually written by people who their brains don't fully function. They heard the word Obama, they got triggered, and then they just mix in a few curse words and shoot off an email without even looking to see how many red underlines there are before they send it off. Just, it's astounding. And I read them, and I mean, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to then shed a tear or think, I got to rethink this whole thing about being on the right? No. I just wonder what school let you out with this type of typing. How did you get out of high school with this? Like, is this how you also type at work and everywhere else that you are? Or am I helping to subsidize this typing because you're some kind of a, public assistance recipient? That's what these emails read like. So I said we were going to talk about Nancy Pelosi owning the shutdown, and you can call in if you want to talk about any topic that we've had thus far on the show today or anything else, 866-963-2037. So how does she own the shutdown? Well, the president's poll numbers are still in the tank. But one of the things that the president has done in making an offer is that he made an offer that's a huge bargain. Legalization of 1 million dreamers, the ones who were brought here illegally by their parents, so they were too young to protest, an immediate end to the shutdown, and the funding of $5.7 billion for the wall, which isn't the total amount that's needed. Remember that. So it puts the onus on Nancy Pelosi. Now, Democrats have made immigration a highly politicized issue by tying it to people instead of tying it to the law. And they treat Hispanic voters the same way they used to treat black voters. They treat Hispanic voters like political hostages. They basically say, we need your votes because without your votes, we're not going to be able to force these mean, evil Republicans to legalize your unlawfully immigrated brothers and sisters. Even though a huge portion of the people who vote for the Democrats who are Hispanic came to this country legally. So what their affinity is for people who break the law and make them look bad, I had someone email me and say, people might as well come here illegally because Hispanics are looked on so negatively by Americans. It doesn't matter if they're college educated or if they came here legally and if they're abiding in the law. Everyone thinks they're illegal wetbacks. That's what the person emailed to me. Now, I don't appreciate him using that racial slur in an email to me, but the quote that I'm giving you of what he said gives you a picture as to how much this issue has been politicized and demonized a certain group of people to the point that he would use that racial slur, he himself being Hispanic, at least he had a Hispanic last name, he would use that racial slur about other people in his people from his ethnic background to demonstrate to me that there's no way he can be free. So it doesn't matter if he's here lawfully. So he says it doesn't matter what we do, we're seen as being here unlawfully, so we might as well just be with everyone who's breaking the law because we're all seen as lawbreakers. Doesn't that just break your heart that people would feel like, because of the way that they look, that there's no way they can be in the right, and so therefore abiding by the law doesn't matter? That is thanks to the Democrats. The proliferation of the use of these kinds of racial slurs against people of different ethnic backgrounds in this country, the proliferation of this kind of underclass and this feeling that some people will never really fully realize truly being Americans, that's all traced directly back to the identity politics of the Democrats and how they constantly beat into everybody that ascribes to their way of thinking. You're a victim. No one's ever going to see you as an American. I see these commentators, black commentators on TV at night saying, I carry with me the burdens of my blackness. In every situation I go into, I carry that burden. You know what? God says you can be free from every burden. It doesn't matter if it's an ethnic one or a racial one or anything. You can be free of every single burden. He's the chain breaker, the way maker. He can set you free. So instead of bowing down to the Democrats and the God of abortion and thinking that Obama is your Lord and Savior, how about going to the true source and giving your problems over to him so you don't have to carry huge baggage burdens of race and ethnicity and different things that have happened to you and carry them into every situation that you go into? There's an answer, but it's not over there. And I know that part of it has to do with when you're entrenched in something and all you're used to is hearing, you're a victim, you need the government to save you, you're a victim, you need the Democrats to save you. You don't just break out of that on your own, but you have to want to break out of it. You know, they actually train animals by tying them to a post, and at first the animal they'll pull on the rope to get free, and after a few weeks of pulling on the rope and they can't get free, they can put that animal tied to a rope on something as light as a feather. They can tie it to a tiny rock, and the animal is now free. They're technically free because they could easily wrench themselves past that, but they won't because they've been conditioned to think that whatever the rope is attached to is stronger than they are. And that is the conditioning that the Democrats have been so effective in executing on a huge portion of Americans. In fact, and it's the pretty people that do it. If you look at NBC, if you look at the different people they have sitting there talking to Americans about news, shaping thought and opinion, telling people what to think, they sound like they know exactly what they're talking about. But when they start talking the subject of race or the subject of political enemies, resisting and all of that, then they're in the victimization lane and they're literally tying that rope around your neck and just hanging it off of a little hook. And you think you can't get free because you think the rope is tied to a big pole that's immovable, that's embedded in the ground 12 feet in some, concrete. In reality, it's just on a hook, and if you just move ever so slightly, you're free. That's the trick. That's the trick. Let's go to the phones. Daniel, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Yes. Hello, Stacy. Thank you. I appreciate the good work you're doing. And I just wanted to, I'm a former resident of upstate New York. I've been in Kansas 36 years. Anyway, so I'm a Catholic, and on the New York State legislators, making law now in New York State guaranteeing abortion, as you talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to just comment on Catholic Church has what's called lete sententiae. It's a Latin term, and I don't know how it translates this, but it's an automatic excommunication to any Catholic who has an abortion or procures or aids someone in getting an abortion. So the point is, the governor of New York State is Catholic, Cuomo, and so what should happen in a good, solid Catholic, healthy Catholic diocese, the diocese, Albany Diocese, where the State House is in upstate New York, or the bishop of that diocese, or Cardinal Timothy Dolan in New York, because he's kind of like the primate of the United States, because that's a very important, St. Patrick's Cathedral there in New York City. Either one of those should go publicly and refusing Cuomo Holy Communion in church because he's done this terrible thing. And if they did that, if the bishop of the Diocese of Albany or Cardinal Dolan had the guts and the fortitude to do his job as the protector of the flock, we could roll back abortion. We got all this tremendous potential power in our Catholic Church, and most of our bishops, not all of them, but I would say 90%, really, seriously, about 90% don't have any backbone, any guts. And so that's one of the reasons why we've got this terrible scourge on our land,
I agree with you. I looked it up, and it's lete sententiae, which is the Latin phrase meaning sentence passed, and it's used in the canon law of the Catholic Church. I agree with you that there are things that the Catholic Church could be doing, but we've seen in the Bible over and over and over again where whenever a group of leaders or a leader falls into sexual sin, it reduces the amount of power that they have over the people. And so for the Catholic Church, because of the child sex abuse scandal that has been covered up and allowed to proliferate, the authority of the Catholic Church has been severely damaged by that happening and not being resolved. And so what has to happen is the Pope has to actually allow the proper prosecution of individuals who have abused children in the Catholic Church, and then they have to be prosecuted criminally, and they have to be excommunicated, and there has to be a process by which these people can be punished. And then later they can repent and come, obviously there is repentance that can be had for the individuals who've done this, but they have to first be brought to justice. As long as that scandal stands as an unresolved issue, you're going to see the type of, lack of fortitude or cowardice in fighting back against the scourge of abortion and other major issues. I want to share just a little bit more. I looked this up, and obviously I'm on Wikipedia, but this, it has links. It looks like it's pretty accurate. And the caller was mentioning lete sententia. It's a penalty that binds a guilty party only after it has been imposed on the person. That would be known as ferende sententia, meaning sentence to be passed. But the Code of Canon Law, which binds Catholics of the Latin Church, inflicts censures for certain forbidden actions. The canon law that binds members of the Eastern Catholic churches does not include these penalties. So basically, he's saying it's like an instant excommunication that would then be followed on by not being able to receive communion. I think it's worth noting that Nancy Pelosi, due to her support for abortion, is actually not allowed to receive communion in, her home Catholic diocese. But it doesn't prevent her from saying she's a good Christian and a Catholic, because she says that anyway, because she doesn't care. So, I'm not, this isn't me saying something horrible about the people who practice Catholicism who aren't a part of the scandal, but I am saying that we've seen this over and over and over again, and the Bible warns about it. When we engage in sexual sin, it weakens the authority of the leadership, and it makes it so that not only does that leader lack the courage to, step out boldly in faith, but they also lack the authority in the view of the people that they're placed in authority over. It just reduces the amount of power that a person has, and it eliminates some of the wisdom that they have. If you read about it in the Bible, it's very, very clear. Sins against the temple of the Holy Spirit are very damaging, especially to those who are in leadership. So we just have to be careful. My hope and prayer is that the Catholic Church will take care of this problem. I cannot believe that's the end of the show. I have so much more for you. The biggest gun rights case since 2010, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear it. If you're leaving us now, God bless you from the heartland. Thank you for being at home at American Family Radio. And if you're sticking around, you have news and information from onenewsnow.com, and I'll be back right after this.
It was a time when men rebuilt the ruin. With one hand they laid bricks, with the other they held a weapon. Nehemiah said, "Let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach." Our nation, after many years of decline, is in a state of moral destruction. The cry is going out.
Do you see the distress we're in?
Join us in the battle. To learn more about our mission, visit urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Roney. The White House is blaming Democrats for not rallying around the president's proposal to end government shutdown. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders speaking to Fox and Friends on Wednesday.
The only difference is who's sitting in the Oval Office, and Democrats have got to stop playing politics. Nancy Pelosi has got to start putting the American people ahead of partisan politics, and hopefully we'll see that happen on Thursday. If not, it's a real shame.
Democratic leadership says they're willing to negotiate about border security, but Republicans need to allow the federal government to reopen first. The White House hasn't held an official briefing in 3 weeks, and the press corps isn't happy about it. Fox's Rachel Sutherland reports from Washington.
In a statement, the White House Correspondents Association called the lack of briefings a retreat from transparency and accountability. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told Fox and Friends the White House is accessible and that there's been a lack of decorum in the Brady press briefing room.
Look, we're in the business of getting information to the American people, not making stars out of people that want to become contributors on CNN.
Sanders pointed out she gaggles with reporters regularly and the president takes questions frequently. As for whether regular briefings will resume, Sanders said, "We'll see what happens." In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
The Democratic mayor of South Bend, Indiana, says Americans can't look for greatness in the past, and he's joining the 2020 presidential race. 37-year-old Mayor Pete Buttigieg announced on Wednesday he's forming an exploratory committee. He says Democrats could benefit from a new generation of leaders as they try to unseat President Donald Trump in 2020. A licensed practical nurse charged with sexually assaulting an incapacitated woman who gave birth at an Arizona care facility has been fired from his job. Hacienda Healthcare said in a statement Wednesday that 36-year-old Nathan Sutherland was terminated after police announced his arrest. Hacienda says its officials are troubled beyond words that someone who passed an extensive background check could harm a patient and that officials will continue cooperating with police. Oregon, like some countries in Europe, is moving to expand doctor-assisted suicide. AFN's Charlie Butts reports.
October 27, 1997, Oregon voters voted to legalize doctors helping their patients to kill themselves by providing a prescription for a drug that would accomplish it. David Collada of Oregon Right to Life tells AFN that was the pitch in 1997, but a new proposal has been introduced.
The message that was conveyed to them was that this is only for people who are close to dying already. Now you just need what's a much more general diagnosis of a disease that might substantially contribute to the patient's death.
So if a doctor diagnoses a terminal illness but has the encouraging word that the patient could live another 2, 3, or 4 or more years, the patient could still opt for assisted suicide, meaning the old requirement of 6 months to live would be tossed. Also, a patient suffering unbearable pain could qualify for suicide drugs, whether they had sought better pain management or not. Collada adds even someone other than the patient could obtain the prescription.
In other words, someone else could do it. Now, this is a problem in terms of a definition that could easily be fixed. But the bottom line, though, is this still would be really bad because, yes, you can be killed through the mouth, IV, different method, and you don't have to even have a 6-month diagnosis anymore.
Of course, if a doctor or nurse administers the poison, it's not assisted suicide. It's euthanasia. I'm Charlie Butts.
An Iowa judge strikes down the state's fetal heartbeat abortion law. Fox's Jeff Manasso reports.
An Iowa judge struck down a state law Tuesday that would ban a woman from getting an abortion once a heartbeat is detected, which can happen as early as 6 weeks. The judge saying the law violated the state's constitution. The legal challenge by abortion providers included Planned Parenthood, which says it'll do all it can to make sure abortion continues to be safe and legal. Iowa Governor Republican Kim Reynolds, who signed the bill into law last year, said if death is determined when a heart stops beating, then a beating heart indicates life. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Remember, you can access American Family News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when you log on to the World Wide Web at onenewsnow.com. And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called TuneIn. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
He doesn't want to see the government shut down, which is why he has actually put forward a proposal. The big question is for the Democrats, how long are they going to continue to do nothing to actually fix the problem?
This is the 4th time the president has made an offer. The Democrats have not given an offer yet of what they're even for.
That's becoming a real damage to Americans throughout this country.
People are kidding themselves if they think the BuzzFeed story is going to be 100% wrong. I think that Michael Cohen is going to Congress to incriminate the president. That doesn't mean that it's true.
Fusion GPS, once again, was a Clinton campaign paid-for operations outfit. So they were clearly involved in the setup of the Trump Tower meeting. So Fusion GPS and the Clinton campaign are all over it, probably behind it.
We're desperate to get Trump out of office.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Wow, welcome back to the program. Thank you for being with us today. Let's go to the phones. I would love to speak to Marie. Thank you so much for joining the show today, Marie.
Hello.
Hi.
I enjoy your program. I have two questions. One's quick. Do you know when the debate or the State of the Union is going to be?
It was scheduled for January 29th in the evening, so next Tuesday. That's when it's scheduled for at the Congress. And now Nancy Pelosi's letter says that that is no longer the date that she will be receiving him.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, another thing is I would like to know if somehow we could post for a commercial or somehow get to know which Congress representatives did not show up at the State of the Union so that we can get on them for that. That's so disrespectful.
Well, I'm sure one of the news outlets will have a list of the people who don't show up. Normally, most of them show up, but if you're talking about for this new thing that the president might have to do from the Senate, the Senate building or wherever, that is, I know news outlets are going to be tracking that, especially on the right, to see which congressmen don't show up. But I think that's not going to be the problem. So they have a little bit of a schism in their conference, the Democrats do in the House. Not all of them want to see Nancy Pelosi deny the president an opportunity to use the chamber. And the reason that most of them don't, or I'd say some of them don't, a significant number of them don't, is because they know the shoe could be on the other foot, and the Republicans could refuse for pretty much any reason at this point. The government shutdown is not a good enough reason to do this. So any reason could be used in the future to deny the president an opportunity to use the House chamber. It's terribly rude and is poor form when it comes to elected people honoring the people that they represent. It's not actually Nancy Pelosi's chamber. It's not like she owns it herself, but you can see the power-grubbing, power-hungry nature of her behavior and what it's yielding us. It's a terrible, terrible thing that Americans felt it necessary to give the House back to the Democrats because now they're just running amok. Just their behavior is awful, and it's embarrassing. And I can't understand how people can support it. Thank you, Marie, for calling the show today. So I said we were going to cover, and I do want to talk about this this biggest gun rights case since 2010. And it's really a simple matter. It's about the ability for people who are in the state of New York to travel from one place to another with their lawfully owned firearms. So not felons, people who have what is called it's a permit to use your gun at home to defend yourself inside your home. In New York, you're only allowed to carry that gun unarmed, so it cannot be loaded. You can carry that firearm that you have a permit for to a gun range, but you can't carry it outside of the city of New York or the city that the permit is for. So if you want to go to another gun range or you want to take your gun out to outstate New York and shoot outside or do something different with it, or if you own a second home, let's say in one of the more remote parts of the state, you have a cabin or a summer place or a winter place or whatever, you can't take your gun up there. And this is not for criminals. It's just for people who lawfully own their guns. And so this appears to be an infringement of the Second Amendment. And so this case, which was brought in 2013, I believe, has now made its way up to the Supreme Court. And they will hear it when they open their session next, so in October of next year, not this year, next session is October of 2019, not this current session. So that's when they'll hear this case. I think it's kind of fascinating that it's even happening this way. Also, I wanted to share, we're going to have Sabine Durden, Angel Mom's son Dominic was killed by an illegal alien. She lost her son to an illegal alien. She's going to come on the show and talk to us about that, and I can't wait to speak to her and hear her story and just give her an opportunity to have some media attention where, everybody else gets it, but not these parents of kids their lives are shattered by illegal alien crime. And it just doesn't seem to matter because they're not on the right side politically. And so the lives don't matter. But her son's life matters to us, and she's going to be on the show next segment to join us to talk about that. So now, you may have heard that Adam Schiff has a powerful new position in the House, which is normal. Whichever party takes over control of the body gets to determine committee, who's on this committee, who's not. And so Adam Schiff has a new job, and he's pretty puffed up about it. And Devin Nunes was reacting to that. Here he is in number 2.
Well, I think it's important for the viewers to know, Ed, that BuzzFeed is a critical player in this. BuzzFeed was the first news outlet to print the dossier. This was the Clinton paid-for dirt gleaned from the Russian activists or some type of Russian officers, intelligence people, given to Christopher Steele, and BuzzFeed published this information. Okay, so BuzzFeed, along with dozens and dozens of actors of news media people, have staked their entire careers on this Russian gambit. And so they are desperate. So every week we have something new, something comes up that this is the end-all, be-all, and it just so happens that last week BuzzFeed, I think was looking for a Hail Mary pass, and it just didn't work.
So, look, this whole BuzzFeed thing is going to be, it's going to be in the news because the Democrats want it there. And I've talked about it a little bit, but remember, whenever you hear something about this BuzzFeed story about Michael Cohen, which was unsourced and unverified, think about the dossier. When you think about the dossier, it was unsourced and unverified, and BuzzFeed was the only outlet that would see fit to publish it. Remember, all of the other media outlets had it. They wouldn't publish it because it was unsourced and unverified. And they knew the source, part of the sourcing of it was opposition research. And opposition research is not, you don't build stories off opposition research. You can say to yourself, wow, this Oppo research has some really interesting information in it. Let me go investigate it and get my own sources and get my own corroboration, my own proof, emails, letters, tapes of phone calls, witnesses who will verify using their name that, yes, this happened, provide proof that they might have, audio of phone calls that they recorded, whatever. Then you can write a story because you've investigated and you've actually participated in a little something that Americans used to know as journalism. Then it's a story. It's not a story if you just take a book that was written as an opposition research document and you say, wow, this all looks interesting, and then you publish it. That's not journalism. If it was, there'd be a lot more interesting stories out there. Almost every news outlet would look like the National Enquirer, which actually has a pretty decent record of breaking stories for it to be a gossip rag. So that kind of circles us around to another subject that has really been a thorn in the side of the Democrats, which was during the first 2 years of the president's administration, they were able to get a record number of judges appointed. And the Democrats don't want that because they use the judicial system as a de facto legislative arm. Anything they can't get through Congress, anything they can't get through their local legislatures in the state house because they have no power in the states right now, then they just go to the judges. And the judges are all liberals and they know what to do. They give them the rulings that the Democrats want. And if that doesn't work and conservatives or regular Americans who aren't political at all but are being, have their will being completely subverted by Democrats, then they'll appeal, and the appellate courts are packed with liberal activist judges, and so they will deliver the rulings that the Democrats want. If by chance they get a conservative ruling, they just venue shop and go to another venue and say, we have standing in this venue and we want this judge to rule on it. Well, they won't be able to do that because there are so many vacancies right now, and the president still has 2 more years in office. And remember, all of these things are hinging on getting Trump out of office. Joy Behar was not kidding when she said, we just want him out of office so bad, because they know the longer he's in office, the more conservative judges he puts in, the more he reshapes the judiciary at the federal level, the more he's able to undo the pen and the phone of Barack Obama and his temporary presidency. Because like it or not, as historic as it was, because he wasn't able to negotiate with Congress and do anything legislatively, huge portions of Barack Obama's legacy can be wiped out the same way they were put in, pen and phone, executive order. So Trump has nominated 51 judges at once, enough to fill 1/3 of all court vacancies, in a sweeping move to further influence federal courts with conservative picks. These are judges who saw no action in the last Congress because the Democrats are using a procedural move that enables them to tie the nominees up in committee so that they're never voted on, because they don't have the votes to stop it, because Harry Reid used the nuclear option to eliminate the supermajority. You had to have 61 votes. Now you only need 51. They don't have enough to stop it, so they're tying everybody up. So they have a huge list here of the ones that have been nominated. I'm not going to read that to you, but there was a statement from Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham. He says, "I truly appreciate the prompt attention President Trump and his White House team have shown to judicial nominations. I also appreciate the list of 51 impressive judicial nominations to fulfill the Senate's constitutional role in advice and consent." He added that his panel will try to confirm as many as possible as soon as possible. So right now, according to one tally, Donald Trump has put 30 judges on the United States Court of Appeals and 53 judges for the United States District Courts. He's filled 2 Supreme Court vacancies, and should the Senate move quickly to approve his picks as it has done so far, the 51 picks would fill 1/3 of the 146 vacancies. And then it has a list of the nominees. I think this is important, and I'm mainly interested in, so when it was Obama's turn to fill judicial picks, he did so. The Senate honored his picks. They had hearings, they asked the tough questions, but the Republicans did not refuse to allow him to place judges he wanted to place on the bench. Even though they knew it would have lasting ramifications, cases would be decided in ways that were judicial activism instead of adhering to the Constitution. They knew this would happen, but they allowed it because it's the way it works. Elections have consequences. I have yet to hear one Democrat say that phrase. They trumpeted it. Oh, every time I would complain, someone would email me or tweet me, elections have consequences. Well, I knew that. I knew elections had consequences. So what? You know, like, so what if what is the point of saying that? If I'm acknowledging that this is happening because Americans voted these people in. But there's no such matter-of-factness coming from the left right now. You notice that? They do not care that elections have consequences. In their minds, elections are for overturning. When they don't go your way, you just keep fighting and resisting, which, what do you call it when your child is resisting your leadership? What do you call it when someone that you have authority over resists your direct orders, your instructions, your wishes? You don't say, oh, you're resisting. You say, oh, you're disobeying. You're not following the rules. You're not following the law. You're not operating within your contract. You're not doing what you agreed to do. You're breaking our agreement. These are the way that's how adults talk. Resisting sounds a lot like a euphemism for what toddlers do when they don't get their way. They resist the leadership of their parents by throwing a tantrum, by, throwing their head back on the floor, ripping stuff down off of, like candy down off of racks when they don't get you know what I'm saying. They get upset. This prolonged temper tantrum has got to stop. I mean, it makes no sense. All right, when we get back, we're going to have Sabine Durden. She's an angel mom, and I can't wait to hear from her. She'll be with us right after this.
Over the past few years, the AFR family has teamed up with India Partners to help rescue young children from Mumbai's red light district. Through your gifts, new safe houses have been built and existing homes have been expanded, allowing more children to have their basic needs met. They are being taught who Jesus is and about his love for them. Payal was one of the children rescued.
I came to know about Jesus after I came over to this safe house. I didn't know anything about Jesus, but after I came over here, my life changed.
AFR staff members will visit these safe houses in January. They would like to bring some personal notes from you to remind these children that they are loved and are being prayed for. Would you please join us in providing a note of encouragement? You can find all the details and where to send your letter by visiting afr.net. That's afr.net. We hope you'll join us as we share God's love with these precious children by writing a simple note of encouragement. Visit afr.net, afr.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Earlier this month, we saw two contrasting views of how to create jobs and raise wages. After Nancy Pelosi was reelected Speaker of the House, she gave a speech that outlined what she and her fellow Democrats wanted to do to help American workers. She said she would champion the middle class and all those who aspire to it. So how did she plan to do this? She said she would increase paychecks in rebuilding America with green and modern infrastructure. As I've discussed in previous commentaries, the plan for a Green New Deal was tried before without much success. Moreover, it is difficult to see how that will raise wages. The day after she spoke, the Labor Department released the December jobs report. Employers created 312,000 new jobs. There was also an upward revision of 58,000 jobs for October and November. This was incredibly good news for American workers. The unemployment rate rose from 3.7% to 3.9%, but even that was good news because about 419,000 workers joined the labor force and were rushing back to work. Also of note was the fact that manufacturers added 32,000 jobs in December. During the Obama administration, manufacturing employment fell by 210,000. In the first 2 years of the Trump administration, it has risen by 473,000 jobs. I will leave it to economists to debate what policies should get credit for an outstanding jobs report. It seems pretty obvious to me that cutting taxes last year and cutting regulations the last 2 years explains what is happening in the economy. The first week of the new year provided two different visions of how to create jobs, raise wages, and grow the economy. The latest jobs report helps us see what is working. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From SkyPass Entertainment, The Least of These, The Graham Staines Story. The Least of These, rated PG-13, in theaters February 1st. TheLeastOfThese.movie.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here today. Follow us at StacyOnTheRight.com, at StacyOnTheRight on Twitter and Instagram, where you find all the fun, different content that we put up there. And we just appreciate having you listening to our program. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Sabine Durden. She's an angel mom. Her son, Dominic, was killed by an illegal alien. Sabine, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Stacy. It's really an honor.
So can you share with us exactly what happened to your son?
Absolutely. I'm a legal immigrant from Germany. My son and I, with his dad, divorced now, but back then came from Germany to America, and we had to go through extensive testing and all kinds of things that you do when you enter another country. We lived in California, and Dominic started working for the Sheriff's 911 Dispatch Center in Riverside. And on July 11th, 2012, he took my fiancé and myself to the airport in Ontario. We hugged, kissed, and saw each other for the very last time. Thank God I didn't know that, because on July 12th at 5:45 in the morning, while he was on his way to work, about 2 miles from the house, he was riding his motorcycle, and an illegal alien with 2 prior felonies, 2 DUIs, 1 deportation, no license, no insurance, no registration, turned his truck in front of my son and hit him so hard that it killed him instantly and threw him into a wall on the sidewalk. And thank God there were 2 Marines behind him in a car who had to witness this horrific slaughter. And one stayed with Dominic, and the other one chased the guy down because he was trying to run away.
So what has been the reaction? Because when I was talking about you joining us today, I mentioned that you know, stories like yours are so heartbreaking, and it's so unimaginable. My husband and I, we have children, and this is where you just have to kind of, like, you're trying to separate yourself, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't separate yourself from this story because this is your story. This is your son. You can't get away from this. This is the reality that you live with now. Yet what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. is this, it's like there's two Americas. There's one where this matters, and then there's another America where people are elected, where stories
well
like
put.
Dominic's don't matter.
Yes, absolutely. And the saddest part is when it happened, I didn't know when I got the call that my only child, he was my only child. He called himself German Chocolate. His dad is black, and he was German. My only child was gone. I thought it was an accident, only to find out, because another police officer whispered in my ear that I need to ask the DA, find out that the DA and the judge knew him. They had him in custody. They had him twice. And the last time he had a DUI without a license, they gave him probation. He was caught again on probation driving drunk. They gave him probation again, and then 5 weeks later he killed Dominic. And I found out it matters whether you're an illegal, because the law is not applied to you same as it would be to an American. If you or I would hit somebody, it's an accident. If we don't have a license, if we had done this before and ignored our laws, or God forbid, be in a different country, we might not ever be heard from again. And yet I find out illegals have different rights, more rights than Americans have, because the guy who killed my son received a misdemeanor without gross negligence. The judge told us he gave him a deal. He has to honor his word. And the guy served, out of 9 months and 5-year probation, he served 35 days.
Wow.
And like you said, it seems like it's a divided America, where before the left was okay with building border walls and securing our country. And all of a sudden it changed. And the hatred for our president is so loud in our faces that they would rather offer up more Americans than fixing this once and for all.
And so I want to reiterate, Sabina, you said if he had simply been in custody for his previous crimes, he wouldn't have been out and able to commit the crime that he committed that destroyed your son's life. And so when you look at the discussion that's going on with the you know, there's all this back and forth, and it seems like a game to some of these people in Washington, D.C., especially Nancy Pelosi. She was actually confronted by a mom who'd lost a child to, just as you have, to illegal alien crime. And she said she would pray and think about the woman. And, you know, so her response was completely detached. It was this, she was talking about a broken teacup or something, you know, something easily replaced.
I know the angel mom, Laura Wilkinson. She's a friend of mine. Sadly, I know way too many angel mom and dads. And that response, I listened to it. My blood was boiling. Absolutely boiling. And I was in D.C. last week. I was in her office with others. And I asked her secretary, what if I just walk through the door unannounced? You don't know who I am. You don't know my intentions. What you going to do? I'm going to start walking right now. She said, I wouldn't advise you to do that. And I know they would have called Capitol Police to arrest me.
Yeah, because you're an American citizen, and American citizens get arrested.
Exactly, because we follow the law, and it took me 6 years to become a citizen. So I take the flag. I take America at the highest value, because I earned the right to be here. I didn't just drag my son through border fence and underneath a fence and through deserts and told everybody, well, I'm here now, you got to take care of me and my family. The saddest part is, Stacey, that a lot of Americans still think that it wouldn't happen to them. And I have to wake them up, because when I talk about illegal aliens, I don't care if they're from Mexico, from Guatemala, from Sweden, from Germany. They have no right to be here. So it's not a race issue, because I get not called Nazi and racist and Hitler's bride and whatever else they want to throw at me to shut me up, which just gives me more fire.
I know. I know. That
Yeah,
it has
this
to.
happened.
It has to. You have to keep talking about this.
Absolutely.
Everyone needs to
they
hear
can't
it.
shut me up.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad because you know, you said you know way too many angel moms. Sometimes I'll see the stories, you know, they kind of come through your news feed, or I'll see someone being interviewed somewhere, and I'll read the story, and the thread that goes through is usually the person who is killed is literally minding their own business, just doing something that any one of us could be doing.
Absolutely.
Any one of us could be driving to work or coming from work, or you know,
or your family members.
Right.
We are out there and we're exposed to those who drive without a license, drunk, not paying attention. And the saddest part is a lot of times I hear, well, he could have been killed by an American. And I tell him, sure, he could have, but he wasn't. Now what?
Well, not only wasn't he, but so now statistics are showing that 10% of drunk driving in this country is done by illegal aliens. So if you could reduce drunk driving accidents and deaths by 10% by simply sealing the border, why wouldn't we do it?
Right. And when I hear statistics of, well, illegals, or they like to call them undocumented immigrants, which really makes me angry because I'm an immigrant. No, they are illegal aliens. That's the definition by law, and it's not a cuss word. It's just what it is. But I don't care if they commit 5%, 10%, 50%. We should have 0% of crime by illegal aliens because they should not be here. I don't care why they're here. I don't care what their reason is, because I cannot just walk into a nice big house and sit down and say, okay, I didn't like my house, so I want to stay here now, and I want you to take care of me.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, that's called squatting. I mean, there's what's funny is there's a law about all of these things. So we don't have to make anything up. We don't need new laws. We actually have laws covering all of these things.
Absolutely true. We just need to enforce them. That's all it takes. It's not really that difficult. And then close these loopholes. The birthright citizenship, it was never designed for illegals. And why would we have somebody come over illegally pregnant, pay for their prenatal, pay for their birth costs and hospital bill, and then set them up with Medicare when our own cannot afford that and don't get that privilege? We have too many American children, too many veterans that are in dire need. And we handing over about $155 billion a year because of illegals? Oh.
It's enraging. So what do you think about the most recent proposal that President Trump has put forward in an effort to open up the government? It extends, you know, temporary status to TPS recipients and also the so-called dreamers for 3 years in exchange for the border wall funding, which I understand the urgency there. What did you think of the proposal?
Well, like you said, I understand something needs to be done, but I never like to hear the word amnesty at any point, because that word creates more caravans. It creates another, let's rush in here. Because we know that DACA, there's so much fraud as far as paperwork. And when they call them dreamers, which really is an insult because we have American dreamers that can't dream anymore, like my son, I wish he wouldn't have put that on the table, but because I'm not president, I have to wait and see what happens. And he's a brilliant man who's working it, who has done far more for us than anybody else. And I voted, sadly, I voted for the previous president because I believed that he would bring change. And he did. It was just not good for us. But this president, I've been with him. I met him. I've been in private meetings with him at the White House. He remembers. He looks at you. He means what he says, and he says what he means. So I'm praying that this is a way of getting the government running again, having our American people paid, but getting something done for the security of our country. It's just, I don't like the word amnesty. I never did.
Me either. I think it like you said, it brings more caravans, and it makes it possible for them to venue shop and get more cases where they can get people who were not a part of the original amnesty. They then go in and they try to get added to it. I mean, it's a really, I think the thing about it, Sabina, that we don't take into consideration because we don't spend all of our time trying to find ways to get around laws is that there are people who do, right? So they're currently sitting there waiting. Yeah, a whole group of people.
$millions business.
Yeah, not just the lawyers, but the people themselves are in foreign countries, and when they hear amnesty, they're like, oh, so if they do this, then we can just use this law, and we can become citizens too. It's like a lottery.
Let's sneak in and say we're 15 and we're 25, and my mama brought me over. Really, where she at? Well, she's hiding, and this paperwork, just bought it at the swap meet. I got 3 for $200. It's incredible the fraud that is happening with all that. So for me, with DACA, I always like to, and people look at me a little strange, I like to compare it to Disneyland when mom and dad drag their kids and sneak into Disneyland and they get busted. They don't keep the kid in there because, well, he's been here a couple hours. That's all he knows for right now. But we're going to kick the parents out. No, they kick all 3 of them out. And as far as them not speaking the language of their home country, most of them translate for their parents. A lot of them travel back and forth. So all these stories that we hear, why is there so much sympathy for illegals, for illegal law-breaking behavior, while we have Americans that people are shunning, that people are not listening to? I get death threats. I get called the most horrible and vile names. The worst thing I heard one time was, I'm so glad your N son is dead because now he's skinny and white.
Wow.
That's an American telling another American about the death of their child because their concern is more for illegals. And it blows my mind because I'm doing this so nobody else has to.
Well,
I have no family left. This was it.
No, I can't stand it. There's there's what you just shared, but there's also that it just didn't have to happen. I can't get away from that. I understand that we have people who drive drunk in our country. We have people who are criminals. We have all these things in our country. We always will have people who break the law, but we don't have to have more. That's my thing. It's like saying, well, I have a leak, so let me turn on all the faucets in my house and flood the whole house instead of just handling the leak because I have a leak in one spot, so I might as well flood the whole house. That's crazy. That doesn't make any sense.
And American criminals, sadly, have a right to be here.
Yeah.
And we deal with them because we can find out if John Paul is really living at that address or where he was before. Whereas with Juan Tun Lopez, who killed my son, he had a different identity. He had different addresses. He didn't have a license. He lived at different places. And after a while, they given up and just let them go. And the saddest part is it took my fiancé, Anthony, and myself a year and a half to get him deported because I started to wake up. I started to get loud, and we would go to the detention center where they held him in the desert in California. And one of the ICE agents called me and said, you need to be here as often as you can because sometimes we get a note from the top to tell us to open the back door. That is some brutal information, knowing that they're overcrowded, and sometimes they let him out, crossing their fingers, well, let's hope he won't do it again.
Which we all know they do. They do, but they do go kill again. That's how Kate Steinle was killed because the guy, he was released on early release, and he'd been deported a bunch of times. Yeah.
And Stacey, the guy who killed Dominic, I have a really ugly feeling in the gut in my gut because he never apologized. He told the judge, God gives life, God takes life. I was only on my way to work. That was his way of skirting the responsibility of what he's done. He was so flippant that after during the hearing, he got to bail out for $10,000 cash by a federal judge's order. And he came back. We thought he would flee. He would leave the country. He was so arrogant. He came back because, well, nothing happened to him before. He got a slap on the wrist. Don't drive. He drove. He got more probation.
Well, Sabina, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I offer my sincere condolences on the loss of your son. Thank you for the work that you're doing to prevent other parents from going through that. We'll be back with more right after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Speaker of the House Pelosi is unwilling to negotiate on any portion of the president's request for border wall funding, even going so far as to suggest that since the government is shut down, the president should postpone giving the State of the Union address. In response, President Trump took the common sense step of canceling the authorization for a military plane for Pelosi's congressional delegation to Afghanistan, Egypt, and Brussels. No one minded Nancy deciding single-handedly that the president should not have his State of the Union, but liberals across the land are wailing in agony over the cancellation of a very expensive trip abroad for the Speaker of the House. Isn't that double standard glaring? It's time for the Democrats, specifically Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to buckle down and negotiate to fund the wall at the southern border. That is what they are paid to do by American taxpayers. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
The Awakening on Urban Family Talk.
You know, a bunch of people who thought Obama was the Messiah. There are a lot of people who are kind of treating Trump like that.
Bishop E.W. Jackson.
Folks, I'm not looking for a Messiah. I've already got one. His name is Jesus, the Son of the living God. We put our ultimate trust in him. All other human beings are fallible.
The Awakening, weekday mornings at 9 Central on Urban Family Talk. Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, oh, Lord, help me to be more patient. No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers, weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Fox on Justice. The coroner is calling it a homicide, and local citizens want justice.
Pass is incomplete, no flag.
Yes, we're talking about the non-pass interference call in the NFC Championship game on Fox.
Crowd's going crazy as there's no flag right on the Saints sideline.
We all thought that we should win. We should have won that game.
Max Unger of the New Orleans Saints speaking for anguished fans after the loss to the Rams. The St. Tammany Parish coroner says the Saints' season died due to blunt force trauma to the head and chest. And now New Orleans lawyer Frank D'Amico is filing a lawsuit asking a court to order Commissioner Roger Goodell to invoke NFL Rule 17, Section 2, Article 3, which gives the commissioner the power to take corrective measures when a game is extraordinarily unfair. D'Amico would have the league throw the flag for pass interference, turn back the clock, and replay the rest of the game. Talk about your legal Hail Mary. With Fox on Justice, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It was an odd week. You know, they started out the week by really castigating Bill Barr for a rather scholarly memorandum on the use of obstruction with regard to one possible count, the firing of James Comey. And the Democrats and the media went crazy and said, oh, my God, you're speculating. You have no idea what Mueller has. By the end of the week, they jumped all over BuzzFeed and said that impeachment and indictment seemed imminent. And what I think it does show is that there is an initial bias in what goes into a lot of these stories. Bill Barr was perfectly right in writing that memo. His memo was actually quite good. And I also don't criticize BuzzFeed. If they actually had two people associated with Mueller saying this, it was news. It was what the media did with the article that is so disturbing.
Yeah, exactly. It's what they did with it that was so disturbing. Make no mistake about it. Michael Cohen, as a part of his plea arrangement, the Democrats are saying, you know, you don't want to be in any more trouble. You don't want us to get you in even more hot water. You made a plea arrangement, but before you are completely off the hook, we're going to want you to come in and say some things, and you'd better make it sound good. I saw a story on Drudge that Cohen has postponed his testimony because he says he's being threatened by Trump and Giuliani. Doesn't that just play into the narrative? You would only threaten someone if they were going to say something that you didn't like. In other words, more smearing of the president. I have to keep going back to, so, you know, the obviously it looks bleak, it looks terrible, but I keep going back to justice and praying that God would intervene here, because what we're seeing is it's a battle for the very direction of this country. Do you want to be able to express yourself publicly and say, my Bible says that the marriage is between one man and one woman and God, and so that's what I believe? Or do you want to be forced to say, I no longer believe that because it's wrong and it's bigoted and the Bible doesn't even say that? Do you want other people telling you what you can and can't believe, what you can and can't do, what in relation to teaching your kids what God's word says? Maybe you run a Christian organization. You want to be told that you can't have your Christian organization unless you hire someone who's homosexual or someone who's gender confused. This is where it is already happening in California. If the state legislature in California can tell a privately owned company that it has to have a woman on its board of directors, next they'll say you have to have someone who's LGBT. We need representation. Do you see? Because it always sounds so good. Well, women are underrepresented on boards. They're underrepresented if all you're looking at is raw numbers. But if you're looking at skill sets, what business does a woman who has no background in engineering or math or science have on a board of a company of engineers or mathematicians or scientists? Now, your response is naturally going to be, well, Stacey, of course there are women out there with degrees in math and science and engineering. Yes, there are. There are plenty of young women, middle-aged women, and elderly women who have degrees in those areas. But if they were interested in being on the board of directors, wouldn't they have already gone out for that position? So that's what's so funny to me about us being bean counters about who's appeared where. Have to have this many people over here and have to have that many people over there. Who are we to decide where someone belongs? Who are we to decide what someone can or cannot have? The power to choose to be, so this is the power that women are currently working so hard to give up in America. And that is that in America, and America alone, and this is actually dwindling in popularity, but it's still true here, you can actually raise your daughter up and get her interested in math and science, technology, engineering, whatever. Send her to college. She can get a bachelor's degree, even a master's degree, a doctorate in science, math, technology, engineering, art, history, music, whatever. And then your daughter can say, I've met the man of my dreams, and we're going to start our family. And so after she graduates from that last, however much, hundreds of thousands of dollars of education she's just procured, she can then go right into marriage with her new husband and work part-time or job share in her career field until they start a family, and then start cranking out the babies, 1, 2, 6, whatever, their choice. And she can stay home with those kids and homeschool them, or she can be the #1 volunteer in their school district and go on all the field trips and plan all the kindergarten socials. These are choices that women in America have, because the expectation is you want your daughter to go as far as she wants to go educationally. You want them to achieve and excel, but they're not required to then go out and work in that career field full time and make a name for themselves and carve out a huge career and compete with their husband for who can earn more. And so the dynamics for women are that once you're done with school, I see it happen all the time. Girls go to college, they start working, they go into the teaching field or whatever. But when it's time to have the babies, they want to stop working and they want to have time to raise those babies into at least preschool age or possibly, grammar school age. They want to take 5 years off, which means that while they're off at home with the babies and doing all of the mom play dates and teaching their children how to sit up and walk and, talk and then read and then add and, whatever, the men are still working and they're putting in 50 to 60 hours a week and they're still climbing that ladder, and they're climbing it even faster than they would if they weren't married. Studies show that men who are single do not achieve the same kind of heights business-wise. Statistically, the married men outperform the single men. And it's because they know they've got a family at home and they're competing for that promotion or what have you, because it means things are easier at home. They have more money to spend on housing or school or whatever the needs are. So women have a natural bent towards wanting to make a home and childbearing. So now, obviously, this is not 100% of women. There are women out there who they want a career, they go get their education, and they're not interested in staying home and making a home and family and all that. They'd rather have help or a nanny or no children at all. And that's true. But statistically speaking, the natural bent of women is towards making a home and beginning a family and raising kids, which means by the time you get to the level in your career where you're like, you know what? I've been around, I've managed, I've worked at a few different places, and now I really want to add my expertise to a board. I want to sit on a board and help make decisions for a corporation. At that point, there are fewer women to choose from because so many women have taken a detour and stayed at home with the kids. And oftentimes when they do go back to work, it is in a part-time capacity, or it's in a way that still enables them to be primarily they're still the school bus after school. They're still the concierge of all the activities, keeping the calendars, making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. And so that means there are fewer women to choose from for these board positions. Now, am I saying that there aren't qualified women out there who've gone out for board positions and been overlooked because they didn't have connections or some other guy was the golfing buddy and so they didn't get it? Absolutely not. That's real. It is real that the networks that you create can be conduits for opportunities. But shoehorning women onto boards is an infringement on the right to freely associate that is constitutionally protected. And they're doing it in California, which means they want to do it in Missouri and Alabama and Texas and Georgia. They want to do it all over the country. They want to do it in Oklahoma. They want to do it all over. But they'll do it in California first. And they'll get the kinks out and make sure they have the iron fist with which to do it and set that precedent. And then you'll have to spend every bit of money you've got, every bit of your savings to try to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, unless you can find a nonprofit with lawyers who want to work pro bono to protect the freedoms that we have that we're just tossing away because women aren't being treated fairly. Women needs to be on boards. Protect all women's, unless those women are conservatives or pro-life or hold the different kinds of views that you don't like. So I think it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that this is where we are, and that women in America are buying into this trap from the Democrats. Because if you look at, let's take Chelsea Clinton, for instance. They just announced that they're expecting their third child. So Chelsea Clinton, because she comes from a family of privilege, she can, and she's married into money, and of course her parents have a ton of money. And so therefore she has money herself, and she is right now working on building a family, having kids, staying home with kids, et cetera, et cetera. And aside from the off political speech that she gives for $500,000 here or there, or the children's book that she cranks out, to kind of just keep her name out there, and her ridiculous Twitter feed, she really has nothing to do except hobnob around in Manhattan. She has a multi-million-dollar apartment there, penthouse, and she can push her, $1,200 stroller with her kids in it. And, her nannies can help out, and she can spend time with her mom and the mom and dad's many different homes. And she's doing what she wants to do. But the moment she wants to jump back into politics and run for office, it will be a given that she can jump back in. All American women do not have the same level of privilege that Hillary Clinton has to be able to do all of those things without any concern for money. But we all do have the right to do those things based on the freedoms that we have in this country, where we're not required to work, we're not required to stay home, we're not required to get an education, we're not required not to get an education, we're not prevented from it. The freedoms are all there. It's a trick of the enemy to convince women in America that we're oppressed and we don't have any rights and we're mistreated. There are women who are abused and mistreated. There are women who are sold into sexual slavery and trafficked. There are women who are forced by men to engage in prostitution. But on the norm, on the whole, on the lawful side of our country, women are protected, elevated, and are currently outperforming men on all of the indices that indicate a healthy society. So it doesn't benefit us to buy into these lies. Instead of putting our energy into trying to feel like victims as women, we should be putting our energies into protecting women like Sabine Durden, protecting the children of America that are currently at risk of this horrible, it's a devastation. We don't know who it will touch next. We don't know for what reason. We just, someone's in the wrong place at the wrong time. And like the illegal alien said, it could happen to anyone. Anyone could be taken at any time. Well, if you got a whole bunch of illegal aliens running around, I guess so. But if you seal the southern border and start deporting these people and getting them out of here, then what? And the unintended consequence, there are always some, is that we'll have less cheap labor here. And so companies will have to be innovative and figure out how to attract talent by giving them some other perks. If they can't pay them a ton, give them some other perks or benefits that work for them so that they can get these workers in here and they can be Americans. And the other unintended consequence that I sincerely believe in is that the dreamers, the ones who they say they don't speak any Spanish or Guatemalan or whatever, you send them back there and they're used to being in a country like this. You send them back to Guatemala where they belong. And they change their country. They go down there and start, look, this is not the way a government office is supposed to be run. They start going in and changing it for the better. Instead of expecting everyone who comes from a garbage country to end up in America, how about they go fix the country that they come from? So if you're here lawfully, welcome. You belong here. You're an American citizen or you're a green card holder or what have you, and you belong here. There's nothing wrong with that. But for people who are here illegally, they must go back to their home country to change it. You like America? Make your country more like America instead of trying to make America more like your country by bringing your crime and your socialist tendencies to us. Prime example of this, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a woman who should be kissing the ground. Every day she gets up, she should be kissing it and saying, no, thank you, Lord, for letting me be here. Her parents are immigrants. Instead, she's here. She's been educated in our colleges and universities, and now she's in Congress advocating for the very policies that made her parents leave her previous home country. And like Sabine said, we have enough of our own criminals. We have enough of our own homegrown idiotic socialists. Ocasio-Cortez belongs to us. We can't deport her. We can't get rid of her. We have to keep putting up with her. So why in the world would we bring more in to do the same thing? We're all full up. Our crazy bowl is full. We got Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, also an American citizen, and Nancy Pelosi. Between the three of them and also the Clintons, we don't have any more room. We're all full up. We can't take any more of these kinds of people here. If you like socialism, you don't have to come here. You can go to Venezuela where they already have it. Your home country has the socialism too. You can have it there. I just find it's kind of unbelievable that that's what we're dealing with. So I want to listen to this last little bit of audio as we go out of the program today. It's Steny Hoyer, of all people, a Democrat, saying that physical barriers are a part of the solution to improve border security. It's number 3.
Look, I think physical barriers are part of the solution.
So you don't share Nancy Pelosi's view that a wall is immoral?
Look, I think it depends upon what a wall is used for, whether it's moral or immoral. If it's protecting people, it's moral. If it's imprisoning people, it may well be immoral. But that's not the issue. The issue is we want border security. We want to make sure that people who come in the United States of America are authorized to do so, and we know that they've come in. We don't want contraband. We don't want drugs coming in. And we don't want dangerous people coming into the country. Understood. So we're for border security, and I think we can get there.
By the way, haters, the line is at the back, and I am not reading your emails today. I am automatically muting them, which means I am blacklisting your IP address, which means I will never hear from you again. Welcome to the line of haters, and God bless you to everyone else. I hope you have a fantastic evening. I'll be back with you tomorrow with more Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do